Welcome to the Emerald City Hockey Podcast. Join RJ and Dylan as they discuss each week's Seattle Kraken news and top stories from around the league.
All right, RJ. Now, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. We think it's best not to bury the lead too much. Of course, you were at the home opener last night for us, Saturday night for those listening when this comes out on Monday. You know, we all, I think, want to hear what it was like to be in that building. We'll, of course, break down the game, talk about the other games from this past week, but I think, we should just start off with what was like, try to sum up the overall experience of what it was like to be there for that home opener.
Well, I'll just start off with the fact that it just felt like a truly historic moment. I mean, it was special from kind of the moment I walked in, and you see the arena and everything from like morning skate all the way through the day. I mean, there was just kind of a buzz in the air about what was going to happen. And yeah, and so I'm grateful for that. And first off, I guess I just want to thank also the Kraken organization and the media relations staff who, allowed me to cover that game. It was my first NHL game as credentialed media, and it was just amazing to see that side of it. And grateful to be able to give you guys, some more kind of inside coverage than we would have otherwise been able to. So thanks again to the Kraken for that. They've been awesome working with us. So I just want to get that out of the way to start. But as far as the overall energy for the game, a lot of all the players, coaches, everyone said the building was electric. The fans brought the noise. It was amazing. And there were certainly parts of the game where I felt that was the case. I did see some comments as I was looking through the chat of our post-game live about the feeling that, maybe there were kind of a lot of suits in the audience. The tickets were very expensive to get in. It was not cheap. And I felt that there was maybe an element of that. I happened to be sitting front row of section 105, which is kind of in the middle height-wise of the arena, right? Basically about half the fans above me, half the fans below me. And for a lot of the game, I felt like the majority of the noise was coming from above me. I will just say that much. And how do I say this the right way? But I'm looking forward to maybe some future games where the ticket prices go down a little bit and you have some fans in the building that maybe weren't able to go last night, due to cost restrictions. And I do want to mention one story real quick. There were some construction workers who had helped build the arena that I got to meet with, because I live by the arena. I walked by there a lot during the construction. I got to meet some of the construction workers, and I found out that a few of them that I knew had been given tickets, kind of a last minute thing before the game. And they were up, in the kind of upper 200 section. And I went to meet with them at intermission. And man, I tell you, that section with the construction workers was loud. I mean, that was, as advertised, Seattle fans, they're bringing the noise. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that for future games. But overall, especially after that Vince Dunn goal, the energy, man, like the building was ready to pop off the whole first period. And it was great to see the timing of that goal.
Yeah, and I think for the most part that was kind of the sense we got watching it too. The crowd seemed very engaged, right? Every time there was a close shot, everybody was standing up. Stuff like that was happening, so you could kind of get that feel for what was going on. Yeah, obviously expensive games, big playoff games and stuff. You and I have been to enough of those that we know, certainly in larger cities, that tends to what happens, right? Like they get bought up by companies, given out as vendor gifts, all that kind of stuff. It's just part of the business. Definitely think, over the course of the year, the Seattle fans are going to show up in a big way and make that place, even more electric probably than it was last night. Let's talk kind of just, the arena in general. It looked kind of small, like in a good way. On TV last night, it felt, kind of intimate and like everybody was kind of really on top of the ice. Was that kind of what it was like to be there?
Definitely. And I was there for morning skate, and afterwards I kind of walked around the arena, tried to get it, take it in from all angles, really, walked around all the different sections, the different levels. And that's a great way of describing it. And Coach Hackstall said something like that, where it feels like there's 17,000 fans right on top of you. And it does kind of have that orientation. And you look at that, it's because, they've dug straight down. I mean, it's amazing how far underground, the ice level actually is. And I think it makes it a really unique building, a unique atmosphere. And the sight lines are incredible for the seats, for the fans. There's not a bad seat in the building. And it does have that kind of smaller, intimate atmosphere, yet in an arena that seats 17,000. So it's, average NHL size, but it feels like a much smaller building in a good way.
Yeah, no, you definitely got that sense. I was going to ask about that. What was it like to like enter an arena and then immediately have to go down escalators rather than up?
It threw me off a little bit. Some of the media members were trying to kind of figure out where everything was. You had the different elevators, all these levels below ground. Yeah, it's a learning experience. I just remembered the comment that Coach Hackstall made when they were asked, well, have you gotten kind of the lay of the land with the arena? Have you learned it a little bit? You've been there like one day. And he's like, well, if I get lost, there'll always be someone there to point me in the right direction. And that's kind of what we fell back on. But yeah, it definitely had a different feel to it. And again, just looking outside, being on ground level, looking out the windows at the ground, and then being, at the very upper deck of the arena, it's just something I haven't experienced before, but it was really cool.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I'm a big fan of being underground. I know I'm in the minority with that, but I've always loved it. Yeah, it was really cool to have like, those windows there on either side. It looked like, were they on either side the windows?
You're talking about on the ends?
At the ends, yeah.
It was just on one side is the
Okay.
window. But okay, I have to mention this. I love that they left it open so that fans could look inside. I have been walking around the arena beforehand, and I noticed I could peek inside and look at how it was going. But I noticed for the two concerts that they did, Coldplay, they had closed it up before that. So for the concert, it was all closed. You couldn't see inside. And I understand for the, kind of effect you want to have for a concert, that's what you want to do. But I am so glad that they left it open, because as a fan there in the building, you could see people on the outside looking in, and it just created a really cool effect. Yeah, and I think it's great that, even if you don't have a ticket, maybe you can stop by and just see a little bit of the game. So I like that effect.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to bring up, because I thought that was totally awesome that they did that. I think that's very unique to this arena, and a really awesome thing for people. I'll move on from the arena in a little bit. Just some quick kind of maybe these are some geeky questions to be asking, but like one of the things you and I noticed when we went to Vegas for the first time, that arena, was that it was very lower bowl heavy for an arena. It felt like that lower bowl made up more than half of it. If you looked up, it looked like Seattle might be a little similar to that, maybe not quite to the same extent. Is that kind of really how it was at?
Yes, that's actually one of the first thoughts that I had when I went down into the lower bowl for morning skate, is it felt kind of lower bowl heavy in the similar way that Vegas is. And remember, we discussed at that game, that's something that we liked. And you could be sitting, kind of at the very back of the lower bowl, but the sight lines are still great because of how angled it is. Yeah, and it's kind of got this different configuration too, where you've got height-wise, you've got the lower bowl, obviously, and then on the two ends, like behind the two goals, you have kind of the next level, and that's the 100 section, which is actually lower than on the sides, the 200 section. But in a lot of arenas, it's all just the same height all the way around for that upper section. And as a result of that, those seats kind of behind the two goals, they feel really far from the ice, and they're just not the best seats. And that's not the case at Climate Pledge Arena, and I really like that configuration. I was sitting in one of those 100 sections behind the two goals, and it is the best seat in a section like that of any arena I've been to. I mean, they really did kind of make sure there's no bad seat in the house.
Right, and I got to think one of the things that contributes to that lack of bad seating is the, big unique feature that they certainly, we got a good look at it a couple times on the broadcast. It's the dual jumbotrons. Like, that is
Yes.
wild. And I know, the players were joking on the bench about, I don't know where to look, right, left or right, because we're so programmed to look center for something like that. What was it, like having two of those there?
It was it took an adjustment really, because one thing that you have to remember is that the best view for you may not always be in the jumbotron that's closest to you, which I wasn't expecting. Uh, Turns out the far jumbotron had a screen that was kind of angled directly at me, and the near ones were just a little bit off. But they're big enough that found myself looking at the far jumbotron more often than the near one, which was a bit of an adjustment. But man, there's always a good view of whatever is going on the jumbotron. So I mean, there's not a missed angle there. So I like what they were able to do with it. And they're not just a cube shape. They kind of have this angled. Geez, I don't know what to call it, but they were using the screens as squares, and then they had that angled section look like the hull of a boat, of a ship. I don't know if you caught that, were able to catch that on the broadcast, but I thought that was a really cool feature and a way to kind of use the screen to create an effect there.
Yeah, no, we weren't able to get a lot of, kind of detailed shots on, well, anything on the broadcast. Kind of before we get into like the actual game experience, just finishing up with the arena, anything notable about like the concourse sections, anywhere where they have, I don't think you probably got into any of the lounges, but, just kind of walking around the outer parts of the arena, anything notable that you want to bring up?
Yes. So you've got, kind of that top level, which you can see if you just walk by the arena. And that's one thing I like about the arena too, is that you've got these glass windows that if you're just happen to be outside the arena, you can walk around and see a lot of what that top concourse looks like. You can see the restaurants inside. You can kind of have that experience of seeing what it's like. And it gives it kind of an open feel. And just like where you can look in at the rink during the game, it kind of provides a sense of community, even if you're not really in the building. So then you go down a level and you've got kind of the lower bowl concourse. And I found that very interesting. You've got the Kraken team store there, down the escalator. Oh, by the way, like on the side of the escalator, they've got this like under screen showing like underwater, you've got coral and all these underwater plants. I mean, they really do kind of set the mood there. Going around, you've got the climate pledge plant wall, which I know a lot of pictures have circulated of. There was some speculation that might be basically become the selfie wall, and certainly through the first game that was the case. Every time I walked by, there were a whole bunch of people just taking selfies in front of the plants and the climate pledge thing. So that's definitely a big draw for people, and that was cool to see. I like kind of how open it felt too. In a lot of arenas, you can kind of feel closed in those concourses, and there's not a whole lot of room. But they made sure to make it, all the walkways pretty wide and give it more of an open feel, which I enjoyed. And lots of areas where you can kind of just look down at the ice too. It felt might it be almost more like a ballpark, like a baseball ballpark going around, where you lots of views down at the field as you're going around. So I did like that level.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, so excited to eventually get in there. So you mentioned kind of with the jumbotrons, they had some stuff that kind of reminded you of a ship's hull. Was there any more kind of nautical type theme stuff around the arena? Anything kind of setting the mood for a Kraken? I know we aren't going to see a Kraken, but just kind of more touches to give you that feel.
Yes, and I mentioned it a little bit with that screen with all the nautical imagery, and there's lots of kind of screen signs everywhere that just have, nautical sea-based things that kind of give you that feel. You can tell they've kind of gone into little details. They had these signs normally at the arena. You're not supposed to walk down into the aisles while play is going, and they have signs that basically just say stop. That the ushers hold. But they said, oh, what did they say? something like "Park Your Ship" or something. It was something like that. So you could tell they thought about the details there and trying to set the theme. Um, and also, I have to mention the eye. I don't know if you could see that on the broadcast, but it was right above that window section where the fans could look in from outside. They had a big Kraken eye that was just there the entire game. I would have liked to see them do more with it, I guess, with some kind of effect or in the intro show. We'll get to that later because we'll talk about the intro show and everything. But they had that Kraken eye that was just ever present, up at the top of the building.
Yeah, is it like a cling or something that's on there? Was it projected on? Was it
I believe
a
it was
screen?
projected.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was projected.
And it didn't have like any movement, like it didn't blink or anything like that. Kind of look around.
I didn't notice it blink. But that that would be something to add. Yeah, I didn't notice it blink, but it felt like it wasn't totally stagnant. Maybe that's because it was projected and maybe the projector, moving around a little bit. But it felt like there was definitely some movement to it, like it was alive a little bit, but I didn't see it blink.
Okay. Well, I mean, you kind of mentioned it there. We can kind of move into, the pregame experience because that's what I think a lot of us were curious about. We didn't get to see basically any of it as part of the broadcast.
That's a shame.
Like
that is a shame.
They started introducing things and then they were like, "We'll be right back." And then they went to like a 7-minute commercial. And then they came back for the national anthem, and it was just like, what? Like and it was clear they were setting things up, and we just missed out on all of it. So I'm very curious, what, was there a pregame show, and kind of what was it?
Okay, yes, there was a pregame show, and there were kind of, I'll say, 4 elements to it. One, you had the speech by Gary Bettman. I don't know. I guess you didn't get to see any of that.
All we saw was the wiki speech. That was it.
Okay. So thank you. That helps. So there was a speech by Gary Bettman. He was up on the little stage area, kind of at the top of the arena, and it's a Gary Bettman speech. He talks about how great the market is and how wonderful it is to have a city there. It's standard Gary Bettman speech. Yes, he was booed quite a bit as he was introduced. Of course. Mm-hmm. So you have the Bettman speech, and that kind of kicks things off. It doesn't bring a ton of energy, I suppose. It's a Gary Bettman speech. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And then you have the Lewicki speech, which I guess you did see some of or all of. And it started strong. So we did it. We're here. We got the team. We are a National Hockey League market, and I got the crowd super fired up. And I thought he did a really good job at the start. It kind of tailed off a bit as he started kind of, bragging about all the season ticket deposits, and you can't keep a CEO from being a CEO for that long. He's gonna talk about that stuff, and I got some comments on that, in my texts and mentions, just like, why is he bragging about season ticket deposits now? So tailed off a little bit, but then it concluded with them raising that number 32 to the rafters, and we were kind of wondering what they were going to do with that. It was clear from the beginning that 32 was a number that was kind of reserved for the fans. I saw a lot of number 32 jerseys, usually with Kraken on the back, and I do think that's a cool element to just kind of have a number for the fans that they can relate to, and to have it up in the rafters. I don't have a problem with that. I think we got some comments saying it's cheesy. It's I like it. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah, I liked it too. I think anytime a team is willing to acknowledge the fans in that way and try to incorporate them into the organization, really, right? Like, no one's gonna wear that number on the ice because it's yours, so to speak. And I get how some people think that's cheesy. I get how some people think, oh, they're just stealing that gimmick from the Seahawks, whatever. But I kind of like the fact that, it's another Seattle team that's doing that. I think that shows how, much the organizations respect and value the Seattle fan base, that, they acknowledge it in the best way they can. I mean, they're not going to, just start giving away like free tickets to everybody or something to be like, wow, you guys are awesome here. Just like come to the game for free, right? Like that's unrealistic. But for them to do something like that, I think is a form of acknowledgement. again, right, you're talking about CEOs and guys doing this stuff. That's kind of as good as it gets as far as acknowledgement from some of those business people. But I'm in favor of it. I think it's cool. I get that, some people thought it was cheesy or whatever, but I think in the long run it was a good idea.
Yeah, agreed. And it's one of those things that I think it can be cheesy depending on how you do it and the market. But I think at the end of the day, it just fits this market. I mean, you already have the Seahawks and the 12s and everything. Seattle, this is a market where the fans play a bigger role than in most markets. So I think it fits really well. So from there, you got the Lewicki speech, and then you have the player intros, which are always interesting. It's always cool to see, who gets the biggest cheer, that kind of thing. For my money, it was Tanev. Grubauer probably a close second. Yanni Gord with some all the guys you'd expect with big cheers, but I think Tanev just edged him out. I think he was probably the most popular one there on the player intros.
We got to see that, and it was hard to tell through the broadcast. You could definitely tell the Grubauer one just because it was obviously different as everybody was shouting Gru. But I mean, I don't think any of us would be surprised if Tanev was, the guy.
Yeah. And I'm going to talk about that since it came up, the Grubauer, the Gru chants. Man, the fans had that down from the very start. I mean, it's like he was already, playing for 5 years with the team. He was, obviously very popular and early on making those big saves too. That was what the biggest fan reaction was, because there wasn't a goal all that early on. And he was asked after the game, at the media availability, how do you feel about the Gru chants and everything? He said he loves it. So keep them coming. That was great to see.
Yeah. So that was kind of where we, stopped coverage before the national anthem. But, was there anything? Did they project anything on the ice like we were hoping for?
No, they did not.
Oh.
They did have, they had a little, and that's the fourth part I was going to talk about. They had a little pump up kind of thing, but it was the most standard, just previous few games highlights video that there was nothing out of the ordinary. There was no projection on the ice. There was no kind of atmosphere setting, all the stuff that we were, kind of hoping for. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Nothing. So I think overall it was, I would say it's pretty underwhelming. There just wasn't a whole lot, of theatrics. And I know this isn't Vegas. I didn't want a huge show like Vegas had, but I expected something that would make it feel, I guess, a little different than just a standard NHL game, because I'd see that, past few game highlights set to some energetic music video. I would see that anywhere for any regular season game. And it just didn't feel any different. Now, I will mention, someone did tweet something to that effect. There wasn't a wow moment production-wise, and that was last night. And then Tim Lewicki actually responded on Twitter. He said, "Be patient, it's coming. First night has to be about history." So maybe we'll see something else for future games, but if you've got something, I don't know why you don't use it there for the first night. It can be about history. You can have the Bettman speech. You can have the Lewicki speech. You can have the banner raising. And then you can also have a really cool show after that. I don't see why those things have to be mutually exclusive. And yes, if it runs like half an hour beyond the broadcast start time, so what? It's the first ever home game. Like, everyone's going to expect it. Don't do it every night like Vegas does. But, you can have it for that first game. So I still would have liked to see more.
Yeah, I mean, home opener, first, game in the new building. You want to set the stage of, if their like slogan's going to be "Fear the Deep," you got to like set that up. You got to get the fans going. You got to kind of, let fans in on kind of what you want, how to make that building hostile to visiting teams. And the opening night is generally the time to do that. I talked about it on the post-game show a little bit. Obviously, the next game's against Montreal. There is history between Seattle hockey teams and Montreal going back to over 100 years ago. Of course, with the 1919 Stanley Cup that was not awarded to either team because it had to be canceled midway through. So, I thought maybe they would do, incorporate some Seattle history stuff they might hold that for that game. Was there any mention of like the Metropolitans or anything during this?
None whatsoever that I remember. I mean, there was, I think, like a trivia question or something at intermission, but no real honoring of the Metropolitans. Pretty much nothing for that. That you make a good point. I could see them holding it for that Montreal game, and if that's what they decide to do, totally fine. I have no issues with it. It might even be better, to kind of make that game special. But yeah, nothing really. I did not expect the 32 banner raising. I thought instead it would be like a Metropolitans Stanley Cup banner raising. That would be more likely, but nothing of the sort last night.
Yeah, yeah. As far as the history stuff, I could see some of that being saved for the Montreal game. Still disappointing that they didn't have more going on for this. I think you bring up a good point, though. It is possible that that was because this was, a featured game on ESPN Plus. They might not have wanted to alter the timeline there too much. But again, that's unfortunate if that is the case. So then we had the national anthems, of course. Seattle singing Legend. Ann Wilson did a great job with the national
she
anthem.
killed it. That was amazing.
Yeah. I think you mentioned in the post game, not a big red glare chant.
Nope. Yeah, it didn't get going. I was listening for it, but no, I mean there really wasn't much. There were kind of, I guess, a scattered few people that may have said it louder, but it definitely didn't go with the effect that we were thinking.
Yeah, and I thought about it while listening because I was trying to listen for it. It is maybe in a slightly awkward part of the song to have it thrown in there because it's not like at the end of a phrase the way like some of the other stuff is night. But I also think part of it was she was just killing it and everyone was just listening to her, and that was part of it. And then the game went underway. As far as you mentioned it earlier a little bit, like intermission trivia stuff. A lot of fun stuff on the video board during like TV timeouts or during intermissions. Did they, kind of do anything fun, or was it all like the standard game stuff?
It was pretty standard game stuff. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot going on in intermission. It certainly wasn't like Vegas where it was just a constant, show where it never ended, which is good. I don't want that in Seattle. But yeah, it was fairly standard. Excuse me. It was fairly standard, and yeah, not a whole lot that really stood out for me. They had, a little trivia section I mentioned where they had a fan come up and do trivia. It was like true or false. And then the last question was, the Kraken already have the best fans in the NHL. And, true. Yeah. Okay. It's like not too original, but yeah, it was what it was. As far as some of the other Jumbotron graphics, because you did have like the power play, and the penalty kill, things like that. For the power play, I like the like that little like siren that they do. I don't know if you caught that on the broadcast, but as they're announcing it for the power play, they have like a little siren that they play, which I love the sound of it. I think it like fits. It kind of sets the mood. What I would like to see is something that's more consistent as far as like what they play when we're going to the power play. On the first Kraken power play, guy takes the penalty, sits in the box, and then the announcement is, penalty to Vancouver, which means that, they are in the Coors Light freeze zone or something. And they posted a graphic on the Jumbotron that had said like Coors Light freeze zone, and then it had little ice specks or whatever, and it had a little clear area, kind of like a rectangle shape, like they were supposed to be showing the guy in the penalty box. And I looked at the penalty box boards, and there's like a Coors Light ad right on the outside of it, so I could tell what they're going for. But they were already lined up for the face-off, and so the Jumbotron was just showing Jaden Schwartz like off the face-off in the Coors Light freeze zone. There was no announcement that it was going to be a Kraken power play or anything like that, which I was surprised to see because I was in the building a little early, and so I saw them rehearsing the power play announcement, and I thought it was cool. It said, the Kraken are on and the fans are supposed to finish it. Power play. And I'm like, well, okay, where was that? Puck drops and like the power play starts. None of that. So I think they may have messed that up a little bit. On the second power play, they did do the, and the PA announcer said, like, all right, fans, I'll start it, you finish it. The Kraken are on the, and then you could tell the fans weren't ready for it. And the PA announcer just said, power play. So he started it, he finished it. So I think there are little kinks that need to be worked out with some of that stuff. It's stuff that can be worked out over the course of a season, but you could tell it was still a little bit rough.
Yeah, first game in the building. They didn't exactly get preseason to warm up everybody up
Yep.
there, so that makes sense. Kind of move on to music because that was something we talked a lot about, kind of trying to guess ahead of time. I heard just through the broadcast, a handful of the songs I brought up, some in some situations that I thought they would be in, others in others. I had kind of guessed that their like "Come Out and Skate Around" song might be "Can't Hold Us." I heard that to start the second period, so
And I liked it then.
right.
I thought it was timed perfectly then. It was good. And they had Macklemore there. Somehow I completely missed when they showed him on the Jumbotron. I guess I was watching the face off or whatever, but that's the one celebrity appearance that I just totally missed on the Jumbotron. I checked Twitter like, oh, Macklemore was here, but of course he was.
Yeah, of course. It's a given. Do you remember what the actual like "Come Out and Skate Around" song was?
You know what?
I mean,
I
did they?
I don't think they had, because they were doing the player intros. They didn't have a traditional like "come out and skate around." They didn't really do that because it was the player intros first. So I don't think they had one, if I remember correctly. And I was kind of trying to, there was so much going on. I was trying to, make sure to catch all the big moments, all the big things, but I don't remember them having one. So we'll see for the Montreal game, because those player intros aren't going to happen every night. They didn't announce the starting lineup like they normally would. Your starters tonight. It was just everyone on the roster, which is what they do for the home opener.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see something a little bit different next game.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is we'll see. Penalty box. When they went in first, when Vancouver went in first, we heard "Man the Box," Alice in Chains. We felt pretty confident that was going to happen. Later, though, I think on the Carson Soucy tripping call, I heard Rusty Cage playing, which was my I want that for the goal song. I think it does work for a penalty box song, though. Glad to hear that. We heard before the game, it was kind of confirmed on Twitter, "Lithium" is the goal song.
Yep, it is. Which I had it stuck in my head for like that little riff from Lithium just stuck in my head all night, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, it's definitely has a catchiness to it.
Yeah, I guess the one question I had was, depending on what part of the song they were playing, if it gets to the point where he's saying, "I like it, I'm not gonna crack," would the crowd chant "crack" through that?
Well, no, it goes, "I like it," and then the crowd's supposed to say "Let's go Kraken." It's supposed to
okay.
"I like it, let's go Kraken." But I didn't really hear the crowd get into. I mean, again, it's one of those things you kind of have to be given advance notice of, So I saw it on the rehearsals, and they have a little like it says "Let's go Kraken" in the audio that they play. They added that in, which kind of I guess is like a prompt to the fans there. But so I was expecting it because I had heard it ahead of time, but I think a lot of the fans that were there didn't really know that was coming. So we'll see if that catches on.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of really changes the melody of that chorus section in a big way. So that's kind of interesting that they would even try that. So, yeah, so that was kind of it for music as far as what we could tell from there. And anything else that stood out music-wise?
Well, since nothing really music-wise. Since we were, I don't know when we were getting to it, but since we were talking about the goals, talk about the goal horn. Again, it's the fairy horn. It's perfect. It sounds great. I heard, though, that you had trouble hearing it on the broadcast. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd never heard it.
Okay. So I could hear it pretty clearly in the building. But yeah, it wasn't as loud as some other NHL goal horns, that's for sure. It does kind of get lost in the fan noise when the building is really loud. But I still think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the building still has kind of another couple gears it can get to noise wise. So when it really, really gets rocking, like to the peak that it can, I don't know that you're going to be able to hear the goal horn, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. But it is a great goal horn. It's just perfect, the fairy horn.
Yeah, I mean that's always one of those delicate balance things because I think you and I have both been to games where like the goal horn is way too loud and it's just like the shrieking, piercing thing that if it stayed on too long, it would drive you insane. But you do want to hear it because that is part of the experience. You see the puck go in the net, you jump up out of your seat, that horn goes off. That's part of what makes hockey games so exciting to be at.
Yep. And you know what? As far as like the shrieking, piercing, it might be the most pleasant sounding goal horn in the NHL that I've heard.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, which is definitely a good thing. Anything else you want to talk about as far as the in-game experience before we kind of move on to talking about the game itself?
No, I think we just about covered it all.
Awesome. So, that was the Kraken's third game that they've played since we last did a podcast. Of course, we had the 6-1 loss to the Flyers way back on Monday. That was just a brutal game from start to finish. Don't know that we really need to linger on that one too much. Then we had that loss to the Devils afterwards where things were maybe a little better, but still not great. The general consensus last night, though, from me, from the chat in the post game, was that this was potentially the best game we've seen the Kraken play all year. It seemed like they had used that time off to really work on things like the transition game. They didn't play nearly as conservative defensively. It seemed like they really were played the full 60 minutes for the most part, which wasn't something we had seen too much. Kind of what was just your general thoughts as far as how they played last night?
Well, that certainly echoes the sentiment that was given by Dave Haxtell and by all the players that were interviewed to a man. They felt that, Haxtell called it, possibly our best 60 minutes of the season. The players talked about how they improved their neutral zone play, which is what they set out to do in the last couple of days of practice. And I have to say, I agree with their assessment. They picked a piece of their game to work on and improve, one that was probably the most pressing after the last two games against Philadelphia and New Jersey. And they spent 2 days just working on it, and it came out much improved. And I believe it was Mark Giordano who said, if we play every game like that, we're going to be all right more nights than not. I agree with that somewhat. I think there are certain things that are going to have to be cleaned up on top of what they've done. But if their neutral zone play, their transition play is like that every night, I think you're going to get good results.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we noticed kind of right away when the regular season started was that the team was kind of stuck in this halfway between trying to be, a physical grinded out team and being a team that plays with high energy and speed because they do have guys that can do that, despite the fact that they're such a large team. And it felt like, they kind of tried some more of the physical grinded out stuff. I don't know that it's really just going to work in today's NHL anymore for just about any team, the way so many teams are built around speed and just how the game has changed. I really felt like last night they said, okay, we're going to focus on speed. We're going to focus on, outlet passes from the zone. I felt like that was the most confident and comfortable defensemen were moving the puck out of their zone. We saw guys carry the puck, into the offensive zone in the middle of the ice instead of just along the boards. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then once they were in the offensive zone, one of the things that I thought really helped them was there was a lot more east-west passing than we've seen from the Kraken, right? Usually when they want to send it, kind of to the other side, they'll either do it through the point man or they'll just kind of, shoot it around the boards behind the net. But, there was a decent amount of east-west passing that I feel like is what this team was lacking as far as, on the power play, drawing defenders, right? They have to step up, try to be in those passing lanes. At other times, it just gets the goalie moving laterally, opens up the 5-hole, or if you're quick enough, you can maybe get a one-timer off. So I was really happy to see that offensively from them, in addition to just their energy when forechecking.
Yeah, I think they definitely changed things up as far as a lot of their looks going into the zone. And you look at Giordano's go-ahead goal, where that's a quick transition play. They take a puck away in the neutral zone and get it moving into the offensive zone very fast. And you get a defenseman who's stepping up into the play. They move the puck over to him quickly, and a good shot, and it's in the net. You kind of see examples of different looks that they didn't really have the last 2 or 3 games. And it's things that they've added to their game, and especially watching them practice it, those 2 days in practice, you could see it on the ice at the Iceplex, and then you could see it on the ice in the game, which was cool to see. So offensively, I think you had those varied looks that we were looking for, which is an encouraging sign. And also, I want to talk about defensively. That was where Hackstall was after the game talking about is what they really improved. They talked about neutral zone play a lot, and that has the offensive side to it and the defensive side to it. But defensively, they closed their gaps. They stopped giving their opponents the blue line easily, and often it was the blue line plus 10 feet of space in that Flyers game. That was stopped almost entirely. I mean, they really didn't give up many chances off the rush at all, which was probably their biggest issue in those 2 games against Philadelphia and New Jersey. And I mean, there was just nothing to work with for the Canucks on the rush there. I mean, Hackstall did acknowledge that go-ahead goal from Garland did come off the rush, but that was just a bounce over Vince Dunn's stick, and then it's a one-on-one battle, and just one guy outskated the other. That's not something that systems can help you with at all. So overall, I was even more impressed with what they were able to do defensively.
Yeah, and the other thing defensively that I felt like they worked on and did a much better job of doing was, they really did not give the Canucks any time and space when one of them had the puck, right? There was always someone right there on them. They weren't necessarily creating turnovers, but you don't have to, as long as the Canucks don't have the time and space to set anything up. They have to be working kind of really quick on instinct. That's how you do get bad passes made, stuff like that. We saw in that Flyers game, right? The Flyers could just sit there and they could do whatever they wanted. They were able to find guys wide open in the slot. Like, there was just defensive breakdowns. Guys were just kind of chasing the puck. Here it was very much everybody kind of had their man. They weren't giving them time and space. They were really pressuring them, not letting them feel comfortable in the offensive zone if you're the Canucks. And I think that contributed a lot. We weren't seeing the Canucks having some of the easy shots that we saw, the Devils and Flyers have earlier in the week. And I think that's a big, big improvement there for them. Kind of, let's move on to Grubauer and goaltending.
I do think we need to talk about that.
Yeah, lots of talk in the post-game chat about, some soft goals, some stuff like that. On the first one that kind of snuck through 5-hole, that one certainly looked the softest. I want your opinion on this, because one of the things I, considered while looking at it was you have Giordano kind of dive in front of the shot, and I kind of wondered if that obscured Grubauer's ability to see the release, and that affected his timing going down. I don't know. You've played a little bit more goalie than I have. I just kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it may have had a little bit of an impact. It's one of those things that, especially as kind of finely tuned as NHL goalies are, a little thing like not being able to see a little bit of the release can make a big difference. Even so, I'm not going to let Grubauer off the hook for that one, just because it's one where no matter what the release looks like, you have to make sure your 5-hole is closed. It's one of those things that just the stick has to be in the right position, the pads have to be in the right position, and I don't think he would let himself off the hook for that one. But I think the bigger factor in that goal was the fact that that was the first shot that Grubauer had seen in about 16 minutes. The Kraken hadn't allowed a shot on goal since about 5 minutes to go in the prior period, and it was already like 10 minutes to go in that period. So I think that probably made a bigger difference. And this is a theme that we're starting to see from Grubauer this season, where he needs shots on him to stay warm, to stay in the game. And generally, the more shots he has on him and in quicker succession, the better he is. Now, it's tough because obviously you don't want to allow a whole bunch of shots on goal or high quality ones. And if you can go 16 minutes without allowing a shot on goal, that's a great thing usually. But unfortunately, it does seem to be this theme with Grubauer where he just needs some action to kind of stay on his game. And you see goals like that when he's standing on his head in the first period, facing much higher danger chances. And then one like that goes in. So I don't know what you do about that.
Yeah,
It's tough for any goalie.
it is. And, there were some people talking about that. We brought that up last night, the post game. Not only was it nearly 17 minutes without facing a shot, but there was also an intermission in there too. Right. And so it's an even longer, time without having anything going on. I do think that played a role. That's, again, something you and I have been talking about for a while now with Grubauer since the beginning of the preseason. Some people were talking about they should just start taking shots on him, the Kraken themselves. just give him some easy ones, keep him warm a little bit. I've never really seen, like, during TV timeouts a team ever take, maybe a couple shots on their goalie or something, but maybe that's something to consider.
Hey, you know what? The Kraken are supposed to be this innovative team. During TV time, there's no harm. If one goes in, you're not going to get. I don't know if you could get the puck for that though.
That was the question I thought of last night after we talked about it. But yeah, it is one of those things that, I do think he's kind of got to figure out, and the team's kind of got to figure out, right? We mentioned, talking about whether or not he should start the next game against Montreal. I said, look, that's a decision that the coach has to make by actually knowing the goalie, right? You and I don't really know Grubauer at all. We don't know what his mental makeup is, what he likes. Is he the kind of guy that, needs a night off after a rough game, or is he the kind of guy that needs to be right back in there to work himself out of it? It's hard to say. But I do think it's something that, maybe Hackstall or the goaltending coach talks to Grubauer about, hey, let's find some way of keeping you, kind of, I don't want to say engaged, but certainly staying on your game during these long stretches, because even through some of the bad games that the Kraken have played, there are prolonged stretches where this team dominates possession and dominates the shot advantage. So if that's going to, continue to be a regular thing, then it is something that needs to be addressed with Grubauer.
Absolutely. And I don't see that changing, just given the way the Kraken want to play. I think there are going to be times where they're just going to dominate possession, and Grubauer signed long term. This is something you've got to figure out. It's still early. There's still time to do it. Grubauer's a heck of a goalie. But yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like the second goal was as much his fault. It was, on the PK, and I talked last night about, it was the puck moved across. There was the defensive transition from Lauzon on, if you're Grubauer, his left side, to Larson. Larson stepped up to try to make a play on the right side. Lauzon came over, but he didn't pick up Horvat, which was the man essentially in front of the net. He just kind of centered himself. He didn't play the man. That left Bo Horvat open for his second goal of the night. I don't necessarily want to put that one too much on Grubauer. That was a quick pass across to a wide open guy who's got that time and space there. And then on the Connor Garland one, yeah, that one was just super, super unfortunate, totally heartbreaking to see that puck jump over Vince Dunn's stick and go. Not much that can be said about that. I said maybe Alexiak could dive in that situation coming in because he's got the long reach. Maybe you can try to poke check that, but
yeah, I don't know that he could have limited the shot to be any worse quality, like that than it was. I just don't think he could have. Garland's getting that shot from that space at that point.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you know this, but they talked about it during the broadcast because they, had the wonderful Emily Kaplan in, between the boards and between the benches. She talked about how during one of the previous stoppages, Garland was taking a lot of heat from some Kraken fans right behind the Vancouver bench, and he, didn't pay them any mind. He was retaping his stick, didn't pay him any mind. But after he scored that goal, he came over and they showed the death stare he gave the fan that was giving him some grief. And
oh wow.
Like, I don't know how that fan left that building. Like, that stare looked like it was just gonna burn a hole right through him. It was intense. So that's a little unfortunate. Obviously, you want to try to make the building hostile, but maybe try to limit the bulletin board material too.
Yeah.
But that was definitely something. Obviously, for the Kraken, 2 goals are scored, both by defensemen. We've seen the defensemen want to be active in the offense, especially guys like Vince Dunn and Mark Giordano. Saw that again tonight. I thought both goals, they both demonstrated great patience. On the Vince Dunn goal, he was patient with it. JT Miller kind of slid out of the shooting lane, and then Dunn was able to take advantage of that by kind of just waiting out the defender. I thought Giordano kind of did the same thing. Demko had pushed off, and he waited just long enough for Demko to slide a little bit too far over to his right?
Mm-hmm.
But, how okay with you are how okay with seeing these defensemen continue to try to be really, really active in the offense are you, considering we are seeing, some rough transition game going the other way through some of these games, and certainly some, maybe mismanaged opportunities in their own zone? Like, do you think the defensemen are focusing a little too much on offense, or do you think it's just one of these things that over the course of an 82 game season, it'll work itself out?
I don't have a problem with how they're focusing on offense, particularly Vince Dunn, because he's not a player that you ever want to rein in. I thought that he had a great game last night. You saw that first goal, and then for the next few shifts afterward, like in the next period, he was just feeling it. I mean, how he was activating in the defensive zone, spinning away from defenders, often several times on the same defender, just until something opened up in the play. I love when he's confident like that. And he's definitely not someone you want to put a leash on at all as far as offensive creativity. So certainly let Vince Dunn continue to do what he's doing. And you look at that one really unfortunate, mistake that was there, on the ultimate game-winning goal. And that didn't come as a result of him being too aggressive or too creative or anything like that. A puck just bounced over his stick. It could happen to anyone at any time, and it's just unfortunate because he had such a great game up until that point, and that didn't even that's not even a knock on him in that game. So it didn't come from him being too creative. Giordano, similar case. He had a goal. He jumped up into the play, contributed offensively, but he also was largely responsible for a goal against, and it was coming from behind his own net. He's trying to break the puck out. I don't think that's a case of trying to focus on offense too much. I think he had all the time in the world to wait with that puck to find the proper pass. I suppose he did think he saw something up along the boards, and risk reward, it's probably a bad move to make, because like best case scenario, you get a decent breakout. Worst case, we saw what happened. But yeah, it's one of those where you'd like to be a little more deliberate in your breakout, but certainly anything in the neutral zone, the offensive zone, let Gio continue to be creative and think offensively.
Yeah, so kind of working along the lines of creativity, that's one of the things that we were excited about Yanni Gourde coming back into the lineup. He's been, it's obvious when he is out there with the puck, he's trying to do things that no one else in this lineup tries to do. He's trying to be creative. He's if he sees something that the defense is going to open up, he's going to try to take advantage of it. He's not going to stick to a system. I'm all for that. I think that's, kind of how you have to play hockey. It's a fast moving game. I don't think you can stay rigid to a system just because of, the amount of, seemingly or random events that can happen. But there was a couple times last night where, part of the price you pay for being creative and pulling some stuff out when you shouldn't necessarily is you have some rough plays. Gourde had a couple passes. He had good shooting opportunities and then would just try to pass a puck. He tried to pass through traffic a couple times. But I'm not in favor of trying to reel him in, at least not yet. I assume you're thinking the same.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's no secret. I love Yanni Gourde's game. And I think he's just trying to create out there. He's trying to create something. And unfortunately, I think to this point, his line mates haven't really been able to fully keep up with what he's been trying to do. I think you need someone else out there on the ice that thinks the way he does. And I will say those players are rare. They kind of think that way offensively. Honestly, I don't know if there's even another one on the Kraken roster right now, but it's tough because he's trying to go out there and create, but he's trying to do a lot of it himself, um, which I think that's another thing they need to work out is, how do you make this work given the players that you have? But I certainly wouldn't try and rein him in. I mean, that one play where I think it was the third period where he's coming in along the right side boards and just drives the net and takes it entirely to the other side. I mean, Demko made a great save, but wow. I mean, that's the kind of net front drive that is rare. That again, give me some of that from Mason Appleton, please. But yeah, that was amazing. I stood up out of my seat with that one. Yeah, I wouldn't try and rein him in.
Yeah, no, that was a great play. I thought Mason Appleton played a really good game last night. Arguably
Yes.
best we've seen from him.
For sure. I think it was the best we've seen from man, if not for a heck of a Demko save there on that breakaway. I mean, and that's one of the things that we saw from Appleton that we like. He recognized the play was going the other way, that there was going to be the opportunity for that chip pass up to him. He read it quickly, he was decisive, and he got rewarded with a breakaway and a pretty good shot that almost squeaked through.
Yeah, no, this was the Appleton that we were hoping we would get from the Winnipeg Jets. Kind of, wrapping up, but two things from the lineup that I do want to bring up. Calle Jarnkrok came back. I thought he played a really good game. I thought he was excellent on the PK, and I think just his style of hockey, the way he forechecks, the way he backchecks, his two-way game. I think even though he doesn't necessarily play with a ton of speed, I do think he was part of why that transition game and why their neutral zone game, was vastly different in this game.
Yeah, he allows you to do a lot of things in the neutral zone that you really aren't able to do otherwise. And yeah, we saw his value in that game. And I like him back on the second power play unit. It really does shore things up there too.
Yeah, but him coming back did come at the expense of Ryan Donato, who was, healthy scratch, not in the lineup. I still would like to find a place for Donato in the lineup. I just feel like through all those games, even the games that, we would classify as bad games by the Kraken, he was always getting at least one really good offensive chance. He wasn't necessarily always lucky with certain bounces, but he's been, kind of the guy more so than anyone that has been trying to create offense and been, kind of successful at it.
Yeah, he's provided, arguably the most of certain qualities that the Kraken have been in desperate need of so far this season. And it's tough to have to leave him out of the lineup. But you have to ask the question, well, then who do you take out? And, before last night, I would have said Appleton. That would probably be the one to go with. Maybe Bastian, even though Bastian's played really well. But at the end of the day, even if you do that, then Donato's still kind of in a bottom six role, which we know isn't the right spot for him. So it's tricky. There's only so many spots in the top six, and a lot of them are occupied for sure by certain guys. So it's something that I think the Kraken are gonna have to try and figure out, because I wouldn't want him sitting in the press box for too many games.
Yeah, and then lastly, was there any talk about Geeky during the post game stuff?
No, I didn't hear anything about Geeky.
There was a couple of people that brought up in chat not really seeing him much in the third period. I hadn't totally noticed that, but then
now
I
that
was
I
trying
think
to
about it.
yeah, but then as I was thinking about it, I couldn't think of him either, but I didn't know if that was just like, he wasn't really involved in things, or if he was actually, off. Obviously, he had that scary hit in the New Jersey game, worked all week to come back for this one. So I didn't know if there, Hackstall or anybody had mentioned anything.
Well, I'm checking. He had 9 minutes, 18 seconds of total ice time, which was second lowest on the team. So it's low, but it's not, like 5 minutes, not unheard of. I don't know what his third period ice time was, but you're right. I didn't really notice him a whole lot in the third. It could just be a coach's decision. We've seen Hackstall do this before with Barre Boulet, basically just playing one shift in the third. And NHL coaches do it all the time. If they feel like someone just doesn't have it that night, they'll play someone else in the third. That's not something that's unheard of. Geeky will be back. He'll be, he'll be playing plenty. So I don't think that that's an issue. Now, before we wrap up, I did want to mention something because I did see a lot of comments on Twitter and in chat, various places about from people who are really starting to be kind of worried about where the team is at. Obviously, this record is not what you wanted, for the start of the season, thus far. And I understand it can be probably frustrating to hear Hackstall say, "Yeah, it was probably our best 60 minutes of the season," and yet that 60 minutes wasn't good enough to beat a Canucks team that, like, let's be honest, isn't great. Um, so I just wanted to get your thoughts, Dylan, on overall the state of the team right now and kind of what the level of concern should or shouldn't be, basically how you're feeling about all of that.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit last night. I still think it's too early to worry about it. Ray Ferraro mentioned on the broadcast, hey, this team's only been together for 3 weeks, essentially, right? I still very much stick with that. People were excited about, seeing changes, feeling like Hackstall was addressing some of the issues, which, we thought he was probably waiting till they had those, couple days off. So that was good to see. Still, maybe some more work that needs to be done there. But overall, yeah, I don't think we need to become too jaded about anything just yet. Obviously, Vegas set expectations ridiculously high. But again, everybody thinks with them, well, they went to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's, still 6 months away, right? Like, that's a long ways off. We're still very, it's still October, very much at the beginning of the season. I don't, try to take anything too seriously before a team has hit double-digit games played, just because that's when you start seeing a significant sample size, really. You could also argue until you get to 20 games, kind of a quarter of the way through, you don't totally know what a team is yet. So I'm still willing to be patient. I would preach patience. Yes, there are issues. It does seem like the team is aware of those issues and is working to address them. I feel like mostly last night it was just unlucky that they lost that game because of that, as you talked about, the puck hops over Vince Dunn's stick. Connor Garland essentially gets a breakaway. That's just unfortunate. But, I think everybody would agree that the Kraken were the better team on the ice last night. And, maybe there were some questions about that after the Philly and New Jersey games. But from what I saw last night, I do think if the team puts in that effort night in, night out, they're going to win a lot of games.
Yeah, and it won't necessarily look like it did last, because if you give the performance you did last night, you were probably going to beat the Canucks more nights than not. Maybe not a better team, but so I understand that feeling of frustration with kind of where it seems how limited the team is at this point as far as what they can do. But at the end of the day, you have to look at, I guess you have to decide whether you're going to look at this team as an expansion team or look at it as, compare it to teams that are already around, or a team like Vegas that just kind of had this hot start, from the very beginning. And if you're going to compare it to Vegas or other top flight teams, yeah, you're going to be disappointed with the results. But if you choose to look at it as an expansion team, as guys who haven't played together before, as a work in progress, I think you have to be encouraged by what we saw last night. When you look at an expansion team, there are a lot of pieces of their game in total that need work, that aren't where they should be. I think we can all see that. And what was encouraging to me is that after those two ugly games in Philly and New Jersey, they identified a piece of their game that was definitely not where it needed to be. Probably the worst piece of their game, their most pressing issue that needed to be resolved. And they focused in on it for 2 days really strongly. And they fixed it. Mm-hmm. Now, are there still other pieces of their game they need to work on? Absolutely. We just detailed, what a lot of those are, earlier in this podcast. But after last night, do I have confidence that they can zero in on them and work on them and kind of fix it piece by piece until the whole puzzle comes together? Yeah, I have a lot of confidence that they can do that. So that's why I'm not discouraged. But I wanted to make sure to address that because we did have a lot of people, a lot of followers who were, really frustrated with kind of the state of things. And I don't want you thinking we're just, team shills here or anything, just we'll stand up for them for no reason, just because they're the Kraken. There are reasons that we think the way that we do. So I just thought it would be good for the two of us to explain that to kind of close out the podcast.
Yeah, and it wasn't only negative. It was, still 50-50. I think there's a lot of people that are willing to be patient.
But I think good to address everyone's concern. Yeah,
for sure. Just because you mentioned him a little bit earlier, Barry Boulet, Kraken legend, big part of their, as of now, only win so far in franchise history was, was reclaimed by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He is no longer with the Kraken. But he just added to kind of the, the too much of a good thing as far as depth on offense, as we're saying, we really wish Donato was in the lineup, but also there's no one really to take out. It's a survivable loss, but just mentioning it because that was part of the Kraken news for the week. But I think that's going to do it for us. Looking ahead at the schedule for the next week, we have Montreal on Tuesday the 26th. Got Minnesota on the 28th. That's Thursday. And then the Rangers on Halloween night next Sunday. And that's a 6 o'clock start. The other two are 7 o'clock starts, which, it's more normal. So we got all those to look forward to. I do think a homestand is going to help out this team. Certainly if last night was any indication, I think that'll be the case. And, Montreal's probably a good team to look for a rebound game from, too.
Absolutely.
All right. And that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next time.